Batgirl.
Revenge of the Jedi. Whoa.
Super annoying. Let my people go.
He was like the Ben Affleck of Paycheck.
Way loud.
Anytime you're ready.
Welcome to episode 2 of Sheehan is Dead Comics. I am not Sheehan. I am Brian. He's certainly not Sheehan, wherever you are on the screen here. And welcome everyone. And good to have you here. And we got to put it out there like everybody else does. If you'd like to subscribe, we certainly welcome you. We're just two regular guys who just wanted to talk about comics and cinema and geek stuff.
We're psyched.
So I'm really excited about this Zaslav guy. He's no nonsense. It's all about, like he says, it's not about quantity. It's about quality. And he does not mind investing in quality. Whereas the previous regimes, but especially the previous regime, it was more like, let's pump out as much DC content, right? And not even the heavy hitters. Like what they wanted to do, they wanted to take, they wanted to have Leslie Grace, Batgirl, and have her be the Batman, basically, of the universe, like push her.
Oh.
And then Sasha Calle, Supergirl, they wanted to push her as the Superman. Like the same endurance they would gain, like if they were before when Snyder was trying to start it up.
Yeah.
They wanted to make them the focal point and kind of like supposedly start up a new Justice League. I had read on and off, and I'm like, this sounds absolutely terrible. So they were really pushing to get just ideas like that didn't really make sense, and just like, hey, let's see what sticks. And so I'm really excited. I mean, if you were looking forward to the movie, I was not. I'm not a hater. I just didn't think it made sense.
It must have been really awful.
Well, it got the same cinema score as Black Adam.
Oh,
and
really?
Zaslav said that they're excited about Black Adam and Shazam, but they think they can do even better. Like they can make it even better.
Yeah.
So
what does that mean? Like reshoots and things, or how far?
Reshoots.
How far in the process of those films?
I know that their principal photography is done with, and they're in post production. Okay. So I know that reshoots are rounding about, or they did. I'm not entirely sure, but I know that's on the agenda. Hence why he said that.
Maybe they felt like that. Somehow those characters were going to offer more opportunities for synergy between the films and releases than maybe the way Batgirl had gotten scripted.
Yes, well, I mean, no, you're just about there, because the directors, these two fellas, they actually came out and told one of the trades. They said, yeah, Warner Brothers wanted us to put certain scenes with certain characters in the movie, and we had no idea why, but they're like, oh, we got a plan, we're working on something.
Okay.
So they were telling them who to put in there based on like, I woke up this morning and thought so and so in the movie would be a good idea, and let's try and do that. I mean, it just doesn't, what was going on beforehand just made no sense. It's like imagine you're a chef, you're a 5-star chef. You have access to all these, premium aged meats, and you're going to Walmart for Bubba Burgers and serving them at your restaurant. That's what they were doing, and so I'm so happy to see the executives gone from there, and this whole new branch brought in, because I heard a recording on a YouTube channel from the investor call, and Zaslav said specifically, and he said this in the past when the merger was announced, like it was on the verge of happening.
Yeah.
He said that Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman by name, and the DC properties are basically gold mines that haven't been tapped by the previous regime. So that's why he said, hey, we're going to go with a 10-year plan.
Yeah.
So they have like a 10-year structure. They haven't revealed what their plan is.
He very much wants to emulate the way that Marvel has executed their deal.
Right.
and that's what they're looking to do. I think he may, and when he, at least it may not have been the same article that you're referencing, but I want to say that when he was talking about the value of the properties, and it was kind of like halfway between the discussion of the 10-year plan and like why Batgirl didn't make the grade he was saying, I don't want to devalue
That was
the brand. And I think he even mentioned Aquaman may have been in that list of like top tier.
yes, yes, you're right. He mentioned Aquaman as well, yes, among the top tier.
So
But
he just felt like that Batgirl product was obviously subpar, and
yes,
he didn't want to release, hey, let's not have a second Wonder Woman and a Justice League, right? We're going to
right,
tarnish the brand even more.
right. And I love that because the previous regime, and that's what they were doing in my eyes. But there's some fans who were like, "Hey, I really liked what they were doing." I did not. I found it lackluster and pitiful.
Well,
The previous,
having had you have me watch the, I don't know what, because they're like, so Man of Steel, Batman versus Superman, and Justice League. I don't know what you call those as a trilogy, but
the Justice League is disaffectionately known as Justice League because Whedon directed it. Yeah, so that's the one you've seen. So Scott, I'm working on getting Scott to watch the Snyder Cut. You're not a DC fan. Like, you're not coming into it with an affection towards Superman or Batman.
No, not at all.
Whereas I am, like, obviously, as you know,
right.
Just to let everybody else know, like, I'm coming at it from, hey, I really love these characters. Like, there's Marvel zombies, and I don't know if I ever heard a DC slang term, like a DC zombie or a DC deadhead or something.
Is it Marvel zombie? Is that a real thing, or is that just a Robbie?
Yeah. No. That's a real thing.
He didn't coin that.
He didn't coin it, and if he did, I'm sure he would have trademarked it. But
got to make that boat payment.
Of course, I got to buy that brand new Byrne original art from the '75, right? X-Men, whatever.
Speaking of Byrne, just before we got together here this evening, I was watching sci-fi. They've got, which you probably are familiar with. I haven't really watched before, but they have these. They've got a whole dude who just has like a comic book beat, and he does YouTube, and he's been able to interview John Byrne, and
joy, what a joy.
Yeah, well, he's definitely a curmudgeon, it would seem. But in any case, Todd McFarlane was
hey bud.
He was in toward the end of it, and he's like, John Byrne is so amazing, and he's like, John, you need to let me ink one of your pages. And I'm like, I'm just thinking of Rob as I'm watching this. I'm like, oh, he's totally got him nailed.
Right, he does. The L boys. He's like Lee, Liefeld, and Jim. Just unbelievable. I remember he went on one and he was telling how Todd was telling him, "See, I got the you got the commercial line, Robbie, but watch how I got the buildings and the shadow on the buildings and the brick and all this and all that." DC, when they first announced, the DCEU back in, I don't know, 2013 or something, they basically were like, "Yeah, we're gonna make this movie and this movie, and like the Oprah one, like you get a car and you get a car, like it was like you get a movie, you get a movie." And then after BVS and the Rotten Tomatoes reception and the online uproar over that movie, they all of a sudden tried to change gears, and hence you got the Whedon cut of Justice League. Whereas this guy, he seems like, hey, he's going to do what Marvel did, to where we're going to put out these movies, we're going to knock your socks off. I love how he said that, it's going to be like an event.
Whoa!
The movie's going to come out, and it's going to be like, you have to go see this. Like, look at what we did with this. Like, you're going to love this movie.
I hope that's the case. And I'm not saying it won't be, but I think it's a lot harder to do that in 2023 and 24, 25 than it was to do it in Iron Man came out in same year. Yeah, same year as Indiana Jones 5. So yeah, oh wait. So now here we are 14 years later. The consumer is a lot more sophisticated and or jaded. So it's you know, I don't know. I obviously don't know. I can't see what would happen, but it just makes me think of you know, the player who got established at the beginning is in the incumbent and has a huge advantage. And unfortunately, you know, DC punted it a couple of different times there, and so now they're really coming. They're almost starting from zero, right? I mean,
that's what he said. A reset. He said
yeah.
that.
I mean, so but
And
now,
that's exciting. That's exciting.
well, it's a potential great opportunity, but it's a huge uphill battle when the other guy is so far ahead of you.
True, but the fact that he mentioned he wants DC to be, he didn't say we want the movies to be like Marvel. He said he wanted to follow basically the interwoven, you know, gradients of the movies, and that really appealed to me because, all right, now you're saying like you're taking your shot. You know, like you weren't like, yeah, we're gonna make good movies, put them out, and we'll see what happens. He was like, no, we're gonna. I want the financial stability of what they did, and here's how we're gonna do it. We're
Mhm.
gonna make great movies to where you're gonna have to come see it. Like we're gonna make you want to spend your money because we're gonna give you what you want. You know, and that was music to my ears.
Maybe the best plan is to make sure that whatever you're doing is totally not what Marvel's doing.
Correct.
Maybe that's how
And I
the only way it can
and
be played.
I think he's completely on board with that. Whereas the numbskulls from the previous two regimes, they were like chasing their own tail, trying to do that.
Yeah.
Whereas he's like, yeah, we're not going to be like Marvel because there's a different vibe between the two universes
Right.
in general, the comics. So you can't go in and try to make the movies, you know, side by side because they're getting the money and you're not like they were before, like
So
WWE was.
in other words, really what you need to do, what you need to realize, and the typical consumer may not necessarily, well, the hardcore fans would understand, but the person who just likes to go see a good movie and it doesn't really consider itself a comic book, is that these are actually two different products. A DC product is not a Marvel product. They happen to have people in tights, but other than that, it's two different things. And so you might gravitate toward both. You may enjoy both, but you know, there's going to be a group of people who I do Marvel, and another group of people is like I'm into DC. So maybe that's the thing. Whatever they need to do, they certainly need to improve the quality of the product. He was like the Ben Affleck of Paycheck and some of his other real, you know, terrible stuff that he's done. I know he's gotten accolades and he's done some good things too, but generally the stuff that I've seen, I've never been, you know, impressed. But I actually liked most of the work that he did in Batman and Superman. I was watching earlier this week. Have you seen the documentary on Disney Plus, Light and Magic?
No, not yet. I want to see it.
It's very good. I watched the first episode. It's super interesting. I mean, I've probably seen every Star Wars or close to every Star Wars documentary that's come out over the years, and there were still things I didn't know that they had in this that were like for example, they were talking about, you know, again, and primarily, at least the first episode is entirely just about the original film. And so John Dykstra, who is the lead on the effects, had to build all of this stuff. He had some experience with motion capture at Berkeley, but it was not like production. It was just scientific, if you will. So what he went and did is he went and he found a bunch of old VistaVision cameras of the sort that were used back when the Ten Commandments was filmed with who is that? Burt Lancaster, not one of those,
Charlton Heston.
Charlton Heston. Yeah. So
let my people go. Yeah.
These things had been retired because they were but they had a giant format and whatever else. And so he went and he got a bunch of them out of the mothballs and then modified them and used it to film, if not all of the tape or, you know, film in Star Wars, at least some of the stuff. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I didn't realize it. I mean, I knew they built a lot of it but I didn't realize they also like refurbished 40-year-old, 30-year-old gear in order to get where they needed to go. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I didn't hear that before either. Yeah.
So yeah, but Light and Magic, if you have Disney Plus, definitely check it out. It's well worth it. It's really an interesting thing if you like behind the scenes film stuff. So Identity Crisis. Is it time?
Time. It's always time for identity crisis. So,
All right.
Bad guys are bad guys and they do bad things. And, they don't just steal purses and rob banks. And the way Brad Meltzer constructed the story, what he did certainly makes sense. A raging lunatic, psychotic.
Well, that guy
like Dr. Light.
That's a bad guy.
Right. However,
what year did this come out? Because I'm not seeing a copyright on the copy of the book that I have. I don't see a copyright information. They cut it out.
I recall being published. This shows it was published. This was published in 2011. The book. This came out in I think. I want to say. I mean, I'll Google it, but I want to say 05, 06. Okay. Because it ties. This is also a stepping stone into DC's Infinite Crisis and then Final Crisis. Mm-hmm. Now, at this particular time, before we discuss the story, you had Brad Meltzer come in and lay this foundation of, hey, the good guys don't always win, right? Mm-hmm. The story itself is actually something that would be in an excellent mystery novel, but he just happened to use superheroes to tell that sort of story. And I remember I had been away from comics for a number of years. And I remember when this came out, I don't remember exactly what struck me as to why I should read it. But I remember, of course, the covers were beautiful, drawn by the late, great Michael Turner. And having started to read the story, I was like, wow, they're telling this type of story in comic books? Like, this is something that you would see, this is like something, this is a movie script, or a plot for a movie.
Yeah,
not for a comic book, but
does seem more like that. That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I absolutely fell in love with it. And then this started again, he laid the foundation for that whole thing. This was like obviously it was in 2004, according to Wikipedia.
Okay.
So obviously 9/11 happened 3 years before that. Dan DiDio, the former editor and most recently former co-publisher, he had said at the time that heroes don't always win. And at that time, they were heavily influenced by 9/11. That, you saw the tension of people, and you saw, things we never seen before. You've seen the National Guard, and you saw, SWAT teams and policemen with machine guns, at a train station, which you never saw before, right?
Yeah.
So the whole mood of society shifted. So hence they adapted that in the comic books. Mm-hmm. So Meltzer writes this story. After this, they start this epic journey to Infinite Crisis, where they have Brad Meltzer, a young Jeff Johns, who was already had some stripes on his belt from the JSA, and I think he was writing Green Lantern at the time. Then Judd Winnick, who wrote one of my favorite Batman stories, Under the Red Hood, Batman Under the Red Hood. So there was this concentrated effort to, hey, we want to lead up to this with this cohesion. And the type of story they told was intricate, detailed, intertwined, and it was dramatic. Nowadays, they write these epic long-form stories sometimes, but it's this bombastic, like Dark Knight's metal, Dark Knight's death metal. Just to me as a reader of someone like this, it's just way too much. It's more like, hey, this picture is going to scream at you and tell you a little story, whereas something like Identity Crisis is going to tell you a big story and the art is going to match it. So this was my favorite era of DC, because as we spoke about in the last episode, what brought me on and was my favorite era up to till this when I was younger was deficit.
Pardon me, sneeze. Roll back, pick up that last sentence, and I'll cut that out. Sorry.
That's fine. Whereas we talked about on the last video, my favorite era, the only one I knew was I thought no way it gets better than Death of Superman and Batman Nightfall, and then No Man's Land, you know, and like all this, and then this comes along, and you know, like we've heard Liefeld talk about. He says as you get older, your taste change. So getting this story when in what I was 22 in 2004.
Okay.
So this was like right up my alley. And it was like, wow, like this is comics now. And the whole story itself, it's a murder mystery, in case you haven't read it. It's a murder mystery. And it's really, really interesting. Again, it's more the plot of a thriller, of a suspense thriller, murder mystery, something with lots of drama, lots of character moments.
That's probably why it appealed to me, because I tend to gravitate. I like mystery, and I also like character driven stories. And this is definitely much more character driven than action, if you will. And then like I mean, the artwork, camera, there we go. So Michael Turner, one of his covers, you know, as Rob speaks to, just gorgeous. And then the internal artwork is just really lush too. It's and that's the other thing that's appeals to me, is it always did, and it probably look at this beautiful picture of Diana. You know, it's just like really again Michael Turner. But yeah, it's a lot of good quality there. A lot it seemed like a lot of the right things all came together.
Yes, it was.
I enjoyed it. I did not see the ending. I had no clue that was where it was going to go.
Right, me neither. And it's like, what?
Yeah,
like, and because I knew who, obviously having read it, but then when I finished it last night again, it was like, all right, she says something, and then it was like, all right, yeah, she references such and such. He's like, what? So hence, and then the whole thing that happens with Batman, like in the Infinite Crisis omnibus that I bought recently.
Yeah.
The next story, I forgot the name of the story, but the very next story that picks up from this is in the omnibus, because again, it's building the bridge to the Infinite Crisis event. And in that one, Batman confronts the League and says, "Hey, you did this and this to me." So,
yeah, that kind of comes back around a little bit to some of the themes that Batman v Superman was trying to touch on too, right? In a different context, but it's the same thing about like how far is too far, you know, and how do you make those decisions, and et cetera, and does a circumstance drive the decision, or should you know who you are always ahead of time, and no matter what circumstances you put in, you're always going to make the same type of decision, you know?
Right.
So, yeah.
Perfectly said. Yeah. Like Ollie says to, he says to Barry, about, when he's talking about what happened to Batman, he's like, you did that to him? And he's like, hey, Batman, basically he said, Batman knows, he wouldn't be surprised, because he knows that, you know, what lengths people would go to protect the ones they love. So, yeah. And so if you haven't read the story yet, I highly encourage you to read it. It does have, for the time, it has, you know, there's references to things that came before, but just continuity moments, not anything really earth shattering that I would say.
Yeah. So if you don't know, and you're not like up on these characters, which I'm not. So I basically was able to read this like standalone and enjoy it. You know, I'm again, I haven't read tons of Batman. I haven't read hardly any Justice, if any. This may have been the first Justice League story I ever read, actually. and it totally is self-contained, and it's interesting, and you get to know some of these characters for the first time, and it's in a good way, and to see the interaction and the relationships between them and some of the complexities of a bunch of people, for the most part good people trying to do good things, working together in a hard situation, and in the complications that can present in the interrelationships.
And you'd be surprised not only by what they do, but by who does it and to whom. Like I don't know if like a subconscious light went on, but I felt like, wow, I don't think I ever noticed that before on the Absolute Edition.
Okay.
Notice the look on their faces. Can you see it?
I could see. So I mean, they my impression from the ones that I'm seeing, and they don't look happy.
Right. They like look at Dinah, the Black Canary. She's looking away, like in shame.
Right.
Carter's kind of indifferent, like, hey, we did what we needed to do.
He's
Ollie's
looking
like
away, kind of.
He's like, oh boy. Zatanna's looking with sad eyes, looking down toward us, right?
Right. Yeah.
Now Ralph's in the middle. But now look at this side, it's the regular, heavy hitters who are like off to the charge.
Right.
So it's giving us a glimpse of what goes on in the story too, because
right.
I was like,
is it Green or
Green Arrow?
Is it Green? He's like, those guys always go running off.
Yeah.
They're never around for the cleanup.
And there's always cleanup.
Yeah.
So right on the cover there, it gives you a big glimpse, because the ones with their head down and kind of shamed, you'd actually be surprised. That's more where the story focuses. And it's fascinating.
Is. Yeah. Which I thought was also a cool way to do it. You spend a lot more time with them than you did with the like you say, the so-called heavy hitters or A-list guys or whatever you want.
Yes.
I know it's good. It's good. I enjoyed it very much.
Highly recommended.
So, book tip. Here's a book club edition of Philip K. Dick's The Man in the High Castle, which most of us have heard of because of the HBO special mini series or whatever they called it. It was on about 4 years ago, pre-COVID, and people were real excited about it. But I think I didn't watch it. I don't have HBO. It sounded to me like, actually, you know what? I watched like 1 or 2 episodes, and honestly, I wasn't really that compelled by it. And I also knew that people had said by the time it came to the end, it was really unsatisfying. So I was just like, I'm not going to invest hours into this thing when I'm not even really liking it to begin with, and I already know it's going to have an unsatisfying conclusion. But this isn't so much about this book per se, but book clubs. So they can be collectible in the science fiction realm. When you're talking standard stuff, they really generally don't hold any value. But the interesting thing about book club editions in the science fiction world is that there are a fair number of important books that people read now and collect and are highly regarded that were released for the first time in this format. So for
that was kind of like a test thing, or they just found it sold better and so they made that book?
Well, so like when Philip K. Dick, early in his career, I mean, he died like in 82 or 83. I think he was dead before before actually Blade Runner saw its theatrical release. So he's been gone now for like 40 years. But he started in the late 50s and in the 60s. And at that time, science fiction really was like pulp fiction, and it was primarily published in paperback. So a lot of unless you were well established and, had like gonna sell a lot of books, a lot of sci-fi, it's kind of like went straight, like lower grade movies go straight to disc.
To video. Yeah.
So a lot of the sci-fi just went to paperback, and maybe some of that early stuff never even hit hardcover. So later on, when the science fiction book club came out, which was probably mid to late 50s, some of the stuff, it was kind of like an upgrade, but without the expense or the level of commitment on the publisher to do a trade edition that went to the bookstores. Well, we've got however many thousands of collector or members in our science fiction book club. So, and we know that generally they buy X number. So we can do a hardcover, and we know that we're going to sell at least, let's just say 4,000 of them, which, doesn't seem like a big number in today's, but honestly, back then for a science fiction book to sell 4,000 of something from that was not, a famous story was a lot. So Empire Strikes Back, the first time that it was released was in this format. So a first edition.
I had no idea.
Yeah, first edition
before the movie.
Well, no, when it came out, probably in conjunction. But I'm saying the first time it came out in book format was actually from the Science Fiction Book Club. So technically, the true first edition of The Empire Strikes Back is a book club. So that's the most collectible and the hardest one to find is a book club edition. And there's others I don't know off the top of my head, but that information you can dig up if you need to. There's others out there. It's the same thing, something from maybe Robert Heinlein, or I don't think any of Dick's stuff was that, but some other famous authors in the sci-fi genre. The first editions are book clubs, and so they're collectible and they'll hold some value. And then the last thing that I'll share with that is the way that you find out is the book clubs, and I don't know if we'll be able to see this, they have what's called a gutter code in them at the back of the book. See if we can get this to focus. There we go. See that right there? So that's at the end, and there'll be a different code that specifies the date and the month that it was printed. So I'm a few pages in. Bring my mic back here. So this book is 218 pages. It's not always exactly on the second to the last page, but it's within the last 3 or 4 pages. KO2. And there's a website online, a free website called IFSDB, the Internet Speculative ISFDB, Internet Speculative Fiction Database. You can go in, you can look up the title, and then you'll get a list of all the printings of that book, and you'll find the book club edition in there. And then not always, because not everyone, it's like a Wikipedia thing. It's moderated by volunteers. Most of the time it'll tell you a first printing of the book club had code such and such. Because a lot of times if it was a popular book, they keep it in print for a period of years and they'd send it out, and you'd have it in the back stock. It's like, well, I don't want the book of the month this month, but I do want this other one that's been in the catalog for 2 years, and you could order that. So this is a 1980 printing. This book actually, I think, came out originally in the
very evocative.
Yeah. And there you go. There's another book phrase for you, or a book lingo, is this would be called a first edition thus. So this is the first printing of this book with this cover in this format, etc. But it's not the first edition. It's the first edition of this one. It's kind of like if you reprinted, when you get your reprinted Omni, and it says or it's like the revised edition. Mm-hmm. It's not the first per se, but it's a first edition. It's the first one of that one. So first edition. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So one of these guys, for example, again, Empire Strikes Back, got a good cover. Let's say with a nice, very clean cover, and the condition's good, no writing or any significant damage inside. It could be worth like $100 or maybe 120. So, I mean, that's not going to change your life, but still you could find them around and they do have value. It's not like they're just worthless. Our Kirby cover of the month.
Batgirl.
Just because it's Kirby cover doesn't mean it has to be Kirby. Now, this is Strange Adventures one of my favorite, well, as I said in our previous episode, and if you haven't watched it, you need to find out how Brian and I both got into comics. I always
like
like
and subscribe. Hit like and subscribe.
Clobber in time. Clobber the like button.
Hey.
So,
bing, bing.
My great grandmother lived in a farmhouse where actually my mother lives now, up in Washington County, up north in upstate New York. And it was always kind of incongruent because like she was in her 80s when I was just a little kid. You know, I was probably like 4, 5, 6. But I loved going there because in their old fashioned kitchen, they had the big old wood stove that literally, you know, you cook and you put the wood in it, and then the big old ones, and the whole deal was in there. This thing hadn't been updated, you know, since 1930 probably. And they had these zinc cover wrapped metal counters, and underneath one of the big old counters over on built into the wall in this wooden cupboard was a box of comics, and they'd been there for ages. So I was born in 67. This book came out in 62, and there was a lot of stuff they didn't care for. It was like Archie comics, and there was, you know, Richie Rich, you know, just the stuff that didn't read. But this one was in here without the cover on it, and it's a great story. So it says Strange Adventures, October number 145, featuring the man who lived forever. And so what our cover is we've got the guy in the lab coat, and he's standing there, and he's got like a beaker, and he's got some kind of a yellow liquid in the thing, and he's going to drink it, and he's thinking, there's the thought bubble that says, this drink will make me immortal. And then we have this weird dude in like purple tights stepping out of this time machine thing, wherever, over here. And he's saying, I've traveled 1,000,000 years from the future to stop myself from becoming immortal, but I'm too late now, because I'll live forever. The human race will die.
Dun, dun, dun.
It's like so corny, but it's great. And here's the opening, like Neanderthal people in the future. And so the whole thing is like they're reverting for some reason. He starts off as a contemporary dude, and he figures out the secret of immortality. He goes to the future, and Earth is being invaded by these aliens, and he overcomes the aliens, but for whatever reason, because of that, then Earth is reverting, and ultimately they disappear, and he's the only man still alive. So he learns how to time travel, and he goes back and he saves the day. But the other thing that's interesting about this is, how many times when you were a kid did you buy a comic and the cover was like awesome, right? It looked so cool. And generally superhero comics were pretty guilty of this. And then you get into the story, and what was on the cover was really like nothing that happened inside. Right. You know, it had the same characters, like here's the bad guy and here's Spider-Man or whoever, but like there was nothing as cool in the story as what was on the cover, right? Yes. And wasn't that always disappointing?
No, extremely.
I always hated that. I always felt like I got ripped off. The funny thing about this, that I didn't even realize it when I realized I was going to share this week, was that this is basically identical to a T to the way they did it inside the story. I mean, when do you see that? Here it is. Here again, that same frame. They didn't change a thing, and they put it right on the cover. It's like, that never happens.
I couldn't even, going back through my mind, I don't even remember a comic that did that.
I mean, the dialogue is the same, the layout's the same. It's literally just like they just blew it up and put it, well, let's put that on the cover.
That's that's a great observation.
Yeah. So anyway, awesome. that was one of my favorite mags from when I was little Scotty comic reader. You said you had a CGC story that you wanted to share.
Oh, yes. A new investment.
Just get a flashlight and just go like this. Here, does this help?
There it is.
Much better. Significantly better.
Yeah, what I did was, I had been holding off on jumping on this ship, not because I didn't think it'd be worth it, but just to go through the whole rigmarole again. But Chip Zdarsky He of Marvel Daredevil fame.
Okay.
He's written the current Daredevil run is like it's crazy. It's crazy good according to people. Now I bought the hardcovers, but I haven't read them yet because as you've seen, I have so many books in the backlog now.
Sure.
But it is on my to-do list because people rave about this. So I remember even hearing about him like, wow, if he's doing that great a job on Daredevil, I wonder what he'd do on Batman. Well, DC got him to do Batman. So he just kicked off his era. Batman 125 with Jorge Jimenez, who's drew for James Tynion the Fourth about 2 runs ago.
Okay.
And so he was on there for a while. He's the one that I sent you, the one with Nightwing, and I was like, hey, this is digital art, like real pretty, real fancy,
right,
real light and whatnot, texture. So he's drawing, he came back and he's drawing for Zdarsky. Now they're on 126. So there's a guy on eBay who, a retailer, and he was selling guaranteed 9.8 CGCs of that first issue. And I mean, there's a bunch of variant covers, but I'm not into variant covers. Like I want, if that comic, I want the one that's on that I would find at the comic shop,
Right.
So I bought that guaranteed 9.8, and then Zdarsky, I saw an interview of his last year or the year before on some channel on YouTube, and he's really afraid of going to the conventions. He has, because of COVID.
Yeah.
So he's like, if you're going to get a signature from me, it's going to have to be through like one of these submissions eventually. So I know with the popularity of this, they're definitely going to do like a Zdarsky and Jimenez submission. So hence, I was like, yeah, when the comic comes in, when that does get announced, I'll send it in and then see what I could do. Because I did something similar years ago. I don't know, 4 years ago with Tom King and Mitch Gerard. When they did Mr. Miracle and it blew up, I bought the Mr. Miracle 9.8, I don't know, for like $65. And then I went to New York Comic Con that year, had them sign it through CGC. I think I paid like $30, $40.
Yeah.
And then I was able to sell it on eBay for like almost $300.
Whoa,
so,
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
so when something like that slaps you in the face, because there's different issues, like James Tynion jumped on after Tom King. Then Joshua Williamson did a brief run, which I'm reading now in the hardcover, Batman Abyss, actually pretty good.
Okay.
And then now it's like, guess what? We got Chip Zdarsky. It's like, what? And again, his track record's proven because he's doing a similar character for Marvel. He took Daredevil.
Right.
So that street sense, down and dirty type of, drama. So now you're doing basically almost the same kind of thing with Batman. So it's like, oh, where's he going to take this? So it's like it was too good of an opportunity to pass up. So.
Sounds good to me. I mean, it seems like it's thought process went behind it, and it as much, there's no guarantees, right? But as much as anything, it's and if it's something that you like, even if it doesn't turn out to be like that other one where who knows, maybe it'd be more. No, it's cool. That's good. Sounds interesting. Be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, that's one that'll hold. Like,
yeah,
that's something that'll hold for a little while. So
cool. I like that.
And Scott's the only person I can talk on the phone and be get all crazy about. Oh my god, So to share it now is such a pleasure.
It's always interesting to like learn and stretch about the things that I want to share one last thing that I picked up is just kind of fun. Nothing super critical, but you see it over here.
Wow.
eBay this week.
Dude, way cool.
Yeah. The repros.
Listen, George Lucas might have breathed on this. He might not have.
Yeah, he said he picked them up at an estate sale. He had a bunch of them listed. And unfortunately, I found them like literally about 7 minutes and they were auctions 7 minutes before the auctions were ending, and he had like 150 of them, and he had just put them all up and they were all ending within like at the same time. So you could tell he didn't really know what he was doing as far as managing eBay. And so I'm trying to bid on all these, and they had like 3 Revenge of the Jedi ones, I wanted those, and I'm putting
Revenge or Return?
Revenge, because remember the backstory on that is early production. It was Revenge, not Return, and then Lucas realized, wait a minute, the Jedi are not vengeful, so it's Return of the Jedi. So anything with Revenge of the Jedi is, rare. Even if it's a repro, it's still cool. So there was like 3 of those, and then there was Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, and I think I got the 1 from 1978 Lord of the Rings animated film.
That's so you wait a minute. A poster?
Yeah, all of these, all the same, that format,
for the Lord of the Rings, way cool.
Yeah. Way cool. But again, I'm pretty sure I could, by looking at them, that they're scans and then they've been but they're still fun. And I spent like $6 a piece, and I got 6. I ended up getting 6 of them. By the time that I realized I was outbid on the Revenge of the Jedis, I didn't have time to spin back around and up my bid. You know what I mean? And so that's why I lost those. I didn't get any of them, but I would have liked to. But I at least got, as I say, 2 or 3 Return of the Jedi, 2 or 3 of Empire Strikes Back, and then the Lord of the Rings. So they're kind of fun. I'm gonna see about framing a couple of them anyway, and then I'll probably flip the others. But that was kind of a fun little eBay thing I stumbled across the last minute. So,
way cool. So
you know what we say? He is not Sheehan.
I am not Sheehan. He is not Sheehan. Keep reading, because Sheehan's dead.
And he's real. So tune in next time. If you haven't watched our first episode, watch the first episode. Lots of good stuff.
Hit the like button, subscribe.
Clobber it.
Same Sheehan time, same Sheehan channel.